Hey guys, it's Paul here, and I will admit I was intimidated at the idea of making dining chairs. I built the dining table. You may have seen that video. I built a bench to go with it, and this is a set of 4 chairs that will fill out the set. My friend George nudged me and said, they're not that bad, they're not that challenging. So what makes these simple is all of the square joinery. There's no compound angles like you might find on a lot of different dining chairs, but yet they look refined, elegant, light. I really like them. Some of the key features on these chairs, flared legs to match the dining table that I met. You wouldn't have to do that, of course, on yours. All walnut construction. My daughter Grace is big into walnut, and that's what I make all her stuff out of these days. And all of the joinery is mortise and tenon. I used a domino. You could use dowels or other forms of loose tenon joinery or traditional mortise and tenon joinery. And then finally, there's a carved dimple detail on the top of these legs that I'm excited to show you how I did that. And with that, and scooped seats. I thought that would be very challenging. Was considering avoiding it, but then did a little homework and found not that hard. And wow, what a difference it makes when you're sitting on them. The comfort level goes way up. Very comfortable chair. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, one really important aspect of this style chair is to make sure that these rear legs are as strong as they can possibly be. This is what's going to support everything in the chair, from the joinery, but what I'm going to focus on for now is the upper support. So what you want to be careful to do is to not introduce, where that leg curves backward, you got to make sure to not introduce too much short grain in the process, because that short grain, if it's too short, can introduce a real point of weakness, and that back could snap easier than you might think with someone leaning back or putting a jarring force on it. So let me show you over as I lay these legs out, let me show you how to make sure to minimize the short grain in your leg design. As you're laying the leg out, you're going to want to visualize the grain running through the leg and try it in different orientations. So first, the grain in this board on this area where I'm going to lay this leg out is really straight. So to give me a visualization of that grain running through the leg, I'm going to hold this parallel with the edge of the board, parallel with the grain, and this is going to give me an indication of how much short grain is in the leg. So the easiest way to lay this out would be to have this flat surface up against the flat surface edge of the board. That makes my joinery easier and so forth. So if I did that, this will help illustrate the problem. So now if I set that over at various places along the length, okay, here you can see I have about probably 6 inches, which is not great. It's not terrible, to be honest, but it's not ideal. In the vulnerable area, I've got about a 6-inch section of grain. I'd like that to be a little bit longer. That's kind of my worst case scenario. So I'm going to just rotate this leg so I have more. I'm kind of divvying it up a little bit. So now if I lay that parallel, you can see my worst case scenario is probably 15 inches. And if I run that all the way through, you can see that at no point where there's going to be any stress on here do I have less than a foot of long grain holding that together. And so that's going to be a much stronger joint if I orient it this way rather than just like that.
Here you can see the template that I made out of 1/2-inch plywood, and I marked all the mortise locations that I transferred to the workpiece to make it easy on me to locate each of the domino mortises. and just tracing out a couple of pieces out of blank. And then taking it over to the bandsaw and cutting it out and leaving about a 1/16 inch or so, not much more than that, to the line, because I'm going to then attach the template back onto the blank and use that as my guide as I take it over to the router table, where I have an 1.5 inch flush trim bit installed. And I'm just going to use that to follow along with that template and route out the shape. And that worked so great. I'll admit I don't do that very often. A lot of times I would just take it over to the oscillating drum sander. But man, this really gave me great, crisp, square, consistent results.
All right, I have all my rail pieces for here, here, and here, sides, front as well, ripped to the correct width, planed to the correct thickness. My next step is to cross-cut everything. Before I do that, I just wanted to mention that right now you have an opportunity to set up your miter saw once and cross-cut all of these pieces with the same setup. Upper and lower here, the main rails around the perimeter, front and back. The sides are a different length, but you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts per chair that are going to be all the exact same length, and it's just absolutely the best time to do it all in one operation. Set up the saw once and make those cuts so they're all the same. All right, same thing now on the upper and lower rails on the sides. Same length, you want to make that cut, all the same setup. All right, I got all the pieces cut for 3 more chairs, and it's time for some joinery. So you're going to want to use a good, strong mortise and tenon style joinery system. I'm going to use the domino, Festool domino. That's a great option if you have one or have access to one. Otherwise, other options that are out there, dowels, beadlock, a lot of different systems out there. Just use something that's going to give you a good, strong joint, particularly where these leg rails meet the legs. The system that I'm using is 8mm dominoes for everything except for the back slats. Those will get a 6mm just because they're thinner and to seem more appropriate. So everything's going to get a single domino in the joint except for these joints. I am doubling up. I'm going to have 2 8mm dominoes. That should give me that additional strength that you want in that joint that's going to take on a lot of torture over the years. And take the time, use my template, and mark all of the locations for the mortises. And I've got the indications on the template itself where every domino is going to go. And I have the same thing on the front leg. So you'll be able to see where each of the dominoes is going to be inserted. Just really take your time. It's also going to be important to mark left and right leg components because they're going to be different. It's also really nice if you have a chair of a similar design like this that you can have just as a visual reference. It's nice to refer back to it. All right, I'm about to show you the sequence for assembly that I came up with, and this is one of the most critical aspects of this project is which sub-assemblies you do in what order. So I'll show you what I came up with. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and how you would do this differently, what might be a more optimized approach. So the first thing that I'm going to assemble is the back slats along with the upper and lower rail. I thought about including the back legs and this lower rail in the assembly as well, and I decided that might be biting off more than I wanted to chew. After I did a bunch of these, maybe I would get to the point where I would take all that on at once. I I do think it would be possible, but I decided to do that. So let me just kind of walk you through that step and show you a couple ideas that I came up with to simplify and add some consistency.
Now I'm just doing the back slat sub-assembly, and you'll see I'll use spacers between each of the back slats to force consistency and clean alignment of the back slats. That worked really well. I highly recommend it. Then once the glue dried for the rear assembly, I set up and added the rear legs in the next assembly step. Now you see me tapping that for alignment using the template to mark the distance between the apron and the bottom of the leg. Then just a simple assembly of the front legs and front apron.
Now I'm just set up for milling some mortises in the lower stretchers. And you can see I've got this guide block clamped in place to position mortises. I'm going 3 inches from each end. And I've got 3 of these ganged together, and this gives me a nice stable base for the domino as I plunge down into each one. All right, now for the final assembly, I have everything dry fit with the exception of these lower rails. And the reason for that is I'm going to custom cut them to fit the width of the chair. So this actually did come out a little bit different from the first chair that I made, so I'm probably a 1/4 inch off. So I'm glad I didn't just plow ahead and make those cuts. So what I'm going to do now is just set this spacer in place, draw my line. I'm going to take that over to my miter saw and cut that and test the fit, and then I will cut the lower rails to be specifically that fit. I have enough confidence in the flatness of this workbench that I feel good about using it as a reference surface to make sure that this assembly comes out dead flat. I don't want it rocking. I don't want to have to shorten a leg here and there. If you don't have a workbench that's rock solid dead flat, then set it up on your table saw. It's a very nice reference surface. So I'm going to use a belt and suspenders approach to reinforcing these corner joints. The first is these simple quarter gussets, which are just a piece ripped to 2 inches, cut at 45-degree angles. Step 2 is to install these corner brackets. This will give additional rigidity and strength against racking, and it'll also be where I'll mount the seats. All right, I decided to dish out the seat so it's a little bit more comfortable to sit in. And what I did was went and sat on several different chairs at a local furniture store to get a feel for what I liked. The ones that I liked were about a 10-inch span, and they dished down to about 3/8 at their deepest, about 3/8 inch deep. So I made this template, and then there was a kind of rose up to an area here, kind of an oval. So what I did was made this template to just kind of serve as a guide, and I'm going to just give myself an outline, and then in here, and then most of them seem to rise up just slightly at a crown, and I'm not going to do anything too severe in there, but I am going to kind of follow that pattern. So that's my pattern. Now I'm going to take it outside, clamp it up, and get after it with a cut saw carving tool. Before I take it outside and start scooping it, I'm actually going to use a Forstner bit, and I'm going to just drop a hole down to almost the depth of the deepest point in the concave profile. And that'll just kind of tell me when I'm there at the bottom.
And here I'm using the carving tool just to gently sweep away the wood. And this was a quick process. I would say I spent about 5 to 7 minutes on each chair with the carving process, and my goal was just to leave it as smooth as possible so that the sanding would be minimized. As it turned out, I did spend quite a bit of time on the sanding phase, but I wasn't in a hurry. I spent probably, I don't know, another 45 or 50 minutes sanding on each chair, going through different grits, using different sanding tools, and it came out really good. I was very pleased with these contoured seats. And then this was a detail that I added to the top of the rear legs, just using a Dremel tool with a carving burr and dimpling across the surface, and then using a hand plane or a block plane to just chamfer the edges. And I was really pleased with how this looked when it was all said and done. Then I applied a few coats of water-based poly, just spraying it on, and then attached the seats using some wood screws with 2 screws in each corner through elongated screw holes.
All right, that wraps this one up. Thank you for watching. I hope you give this project a try and find that it is within reach, as I did. Let me know down below if you have questions. I'll do my level best to answer anything I can. I'm usually responsive within 24 to 48 hours of all the questions that come in. Meanwhile, if you found this helpful, please give it a like. Even if you hated it, couldn't stand it, please give it a like anyway. Hope you'll subscribe and come back. I do a lot of woodworking, some DIY stuff, and a lot of power tool related videos. So thanks again for watching.